40-45. I done figured this raps it out. I maps it out strategically. Timing is everything, and it seems to be the key to my success.
Alright everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Nikita Nazarov, and today I want to break down the newest Chris Johnston mailbag, and it's loaded. The Leafs collapse, Treliving's job security, Olympic concerns, early trade deadline drama, and even future roster questions across the league. So let's get straight into it. So first things first, Brad Treliving's seat is on fire. So CJ basically said straight up that the Leafs talked Stanley Cup aspirations all summer. And 7 weeks in, they're sitting dead last in the East. Let that sink in. That automatically puts the GM in crisis mode. And even though Treliving insists he can trade his way out of this, he's calling around. He's checking the prices, he's gauging interest, pretty much everything short of touching the top superstars. I mean, when you're in a position like this, of course you're going to be desperate, and when you know your job is on the line, you got to make sure you do something, you know? But here's the catch. A bunch of Leaf players have no move clauses. Toronto's dealing from a position of weakness, of course, and any depth moves he had to make that would replace Marner clearly haven't worked. Waugh has been up and down so far for the Leafs. Michelli, there was more expected of this guy. Leaf fans mostly thought he was going to jump back to his production that he had 2 years ago in Utah. It hasn't transpired yet. And their depth overall, outside of maybe Scott Lawn, really hasn't done much. Dakota Joshua has been pretty disappointing so far. So the bottom line is, if you're not a superstar in the Leafs, you're not safe right now. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about Auston Matthews and the Olympics. So someone asked CJ whether there's any possibility Matthews skips the Olympics, either by his choice or the Leafs influencing him. CJ said no chance. The NHL returning to the Olympics is huge to the players, and nobody's passing up Milan. Not Matthews, not Stone, not the Hughes brothers, and not the Kachucks either. Nobody. All right, so the next topic here is a salary cap question that somebody brought up. Can players earn more than their contract? So CJ just dropped the bomb. He said early league revenue projections show that players might actually be owed extra money next season because team salaries might come in below the 50% revenue split. Meaning a player making $10 million might earn an extra couple of $100,000. Rare scenario, but possible. So all these guys that just signed those big contracts, you talking about the Andrew Kempes of the world, you are talking about Luke Hughes that signed to start the year, you're talking about Logan Cooley, all of these players, man, especially the more you're making, the more you're going to get out of this. And so this is a win-win for the league. And yeah, there's a lot of people complaining on both sides about some of these contracts, but at the end of the day, we get to watch the best sport on the planet go down. All right, next up, it's going to be about Sid the Kid Crosby, baby. Who should the Habs target at center? The Crosby to Montreal rumors cooled off because Pittsburgh is doing well, but CJ says if there's ever a chance, Montreal should go all in. He's the ideal fit, but there's no guarantee he'd ever consider leaving Pittsburgh. Of course, there was all these rumors right before the season started that Sid the Kid might be looking to potentially go through a change of scenario at some point in his career, whether it's this year or next year, because next year is the last year of his deal. But we don't have anything as of right now, and Pittsburgh is doing well. So the more that they stay in this playoff race, the better that they keep doing, the lower the chances are that Sid ever leaves. If he feels like this team is faster to turning it around, or let alone making the playoffs and at least helping the young guys get that experience, then he's going to stay on the team. And unless this team completely crashes out in the second half of the year, or let's say next year they get off to a slow start and they're not going to make the playoffs, let's say they get off to a 5-12 record, roughly in that range, then you could hear some rumors pick up again. But as of right now, there's not really much of anything for that. Next up, the Gavin McKenna criticism. CJ says people need to relax. Yes, he's had an adjustment period moving to the NCAA at 17, but he's still producing over a point per game. In his eyes, McKenna is still the top prospect of his birth year, and the tougher competition will actually help him long term. And that's what I've been thinking as well. You know, I've had this conversation off camera with one of my good friends. I'll make sure to shout out his YouTube channel if he still posts on it, but I remember he was telling me, like, there might be a chance that Ehrhoff goes ahead of McKenna or maybe another guy. And I'm like, look, it's his first year at the NCAA level. I know there's more expected of this guy. I know a lot of people are saying he's a franchise level player and he's the next best generational thing since Connor McDavid, since Sidney Crosby, since Alex Lafreniere. But listen, you can't really put that much pressure on the kid right now. You just got to let him play. You got to let it kind of sink in his mind about the transition and everything like that. He's going to get it together. He's still young. I mean, 17 years of age, guys. Like, and he's not even at the NHL level, and people are already, speculating. So it's just the unfortunate part of social media that we live in today. But I feel like Gavin McKenna is definitely cut out for being one of the top players at some point at the NHL level, and expect this team to be in the running for him at the end of the year when we get to the draft lottery results. Now, this one is very interesting. Commentator data system. So CJ explained that broadcasters now have real-time access to puck and jersey tracking data. That includes shot speed, shift length, and total distance skated. Most of it stays off air, but it's there. And we're in that time now, guys. I mean, technology is just really taking over. There's all this AI stuff coming out. Robots are soon going to be integrated with human beings. I'm not really surprised. We had the NHL puck tracking data come out, I think, right after the pandemic or right around that time. And it was first tested, I think, during the 2019-20 season, right before the shutdown. And you see that the NHL has really been working on this behind the scenes, not just for the league itself, but for people that are actually working inside the league. And so that's why analytics has really blown up in the NHL atmosphere, especially over the last couple of years. All right, next let's go ahead and talk about future of down and out teams. So CJ was asked who has the brightest future out of Nashville, Calgary, and the Buffalo Sabres. And he says probably Nashville. They have the most tradable pieces. But none of these teams have officially committed to a rebuild yet. I mean, it makes sense at least for the Buffalo Sabres. They've been doing better over the last week and a half. They're still in the playoff race. The East is very tight. Even the Maple Leafs, who are kind of going through a little bit of a tire fire through the regular season right now in terms of their play, they're not even out of the playoff picture yet. You look at the Calgary Flames, they got off to a very slow start, but even the West doesn't look all that dominant right now. If they get on a 8, 9, 10 game heater like they did a couple of years ago when they made the playoffs, you just never know. And you look at the Nashville Predators, I mean, they really just kind of, ever since I think a 3-1 start during this year's NHL regular season, they really haven't done much of anything. And to the surprise of nobody. I mean, their center depth is just atrocious. I'll call it for what it is. That team is just not a playoff team, period. They definitely need to go through a full-on rebuild. Whatever Barry Trotz was talking about, it was hopeful talk for the most part. But when he talks about the brightest future, I think he means the team that likely is going to be the biggest seller, the team that has the most tradable pieces. I agree with that. The team that has the brightest future, though, I think, is the Buffalo Sabres, however. All right, we're back on that Pittsburgh Penguins train, baby. So the 10th segment of this video, Malkin's future. So CJ expects Dubas to handle things respectfully. So the translation is, if Malkin wants to keep playing, the Penguins will make room. They'll revisit it around February. So that is talking about his potential contract extension with the team. It doesn't seem like there's any trade rumors around Evgeny Malkin as much as there was around Sidney Crosby. I heard from my friend as well that I've been speaking off camera with that Malkin was linked to like the Florida Panthers. But again, right now the Penguins are doing well, and it looks like Gino and the Penguins, they're committed on both sides. So we'll see what happens. All right, next up, let's go ahead and talk about the Demko trade retention. So if Vancouver ever retained salary in Demko after his extension, what would it look like? So CJ says that the league would make the retention apply across both his current deal and his extension. It's a complicated edge case because there's no official rule, but that's the guidance teams have been given. So we got some trade rumor talk about Thatcher Demko. Not really surprised. Again, I spoke about this with my friend off camera. He was telling me something about Demko a couple of weeks ago. We were discussing some of those iffy contracts that were signed at the time. And from what we understand, when his injury first came out, that he's never going to be able to be the same player, the same goalie again, kind of like that Auston Matthews situation. Maybe two different injuries. We don't know what exactly happened with Auston Matthews last year. All we know is he had to go to Switzerland to get a secondary opinion on his surgery and his injury overall. But when it comes to Thatcher Demko, we'll see what happens. I mean, we're not even fully sure if he's going to get traded. This is just an idea that's been thrown out there. But so far, Vancouver, I don't think they've exceeded expectations. I don't think they failed either. I think they're right where most people expected them to be, and we'll see how the rest of the year plays out for them. All right, last but not least, young superstar ceilings. Bedard, Celebrini, Leo Carlsson, and Matthew Schaefer. CJ says all of them have the face of the league potential. All-time greatness, too early to call. That status is extremely rare. Of course, that's talking about the Wayne Gretzky's of the world, the Mario Lemieux. Connor McDavid is obviously in that list already. When it comes to overall greatness for both regular season and playoffs, you have to throw in guys like Sid the Kid Crosby in there, Leon Draisaitl. But these guys, while they're very young and they have a lot of potential, we're going to see how the rest of their careers play out. They're having very good starts to the year. Connor Bedard, this guy right here on Chicago, I got a Patrick Kane jersey on. So not exactly branding Connor Bedard, but branding his team overall. And he's been doing really well. I've actually been quite surprised by his play. I've watched a couple of Chicago games this year, and he is a player that can still get to a higher level of his game. It's not all about the points, but I will say I think he's exceeded my own expectations I have for him coming into this year. Macklin Celebrini, I got to catch more of his games, but from what a lot of people have been saying, they are very excited about him, and rightfully so. Leo Carlsson, I mean, he's really growing into that 200-foot guy that can play on both ends of the puck, and it's great to see that the Anaheim Ducks overall are doing good as well in the standings. It's a young and up-and-coming team. And, in the future, this team against Anaheim, sign me up in the playoffs. And Matthew Schaefer, as much as there's a lot of hype about him, the guy has done excellent for the New York Islanders in his first year at the NHL level as a teenager, playing a lot of minutes, logging, I think, the most ice time for most of these New York Islanders defensemen out there. Forget about the forwards for a second. He's really been out there in almost every situation you can possibly think of, and he's only going to get better from here. I can definitely see the comparisons to Luke. Yes, Luke Hughes in a sense, but I wouldn't say his brother who's better, Quinn Hughes, and Cale Makar. His skating ability, you could compare it to somebody like Hudson, from the Montreal Canadiens. But again, all of these guys, all-time greatness, definitely have to wait and see on that. All right, everyone, so that was the full breakdown of the latest Chris Johnston mailbag, loaded with a lot of Leafs drama, Olympic certainty, trade market chaos, and a ton of insights on some of the rising players. If you're new to the channel, make sure to like this video if you haven't already, subscribe, and let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Make sure to share this video on all social platforms with all your friends, with all your family members. And with all that being said, my name is Nikita Nazarov. This is the hockey channel for all hockey fans to be in. And I'll talk to you guys all in the next video. Take it easy and peace.